So tonight, we are delighted to have Camille Paglia here, and I will do a more formal introduction than usual, but bear with that because instead of my usual ramble. Camille Paglia is the University Professor of Humanities and Media Studies at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, where she has taught since 1984. She received her BA from the State University of New York at Binghamton in 1968, and her Master's in Philosophy and PhD degrees from Yale University in 1971 and 1974, respectively. Her prior books are Sexual Personae, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson, which came out in 1990, Sex, Art, and American Culture, Vamps and Tramps, New Essays, which came out in 1994, The Birds, a Study of Alfred Hitchcock, published in 1998 by the British Film Institute, Break, Blow, Burn, Camille Paglia reads 43 of the world's best poems, and Glittering Images, a book she was here last year with 5 years ago, Glittering Images, A Journey Through Art from Egypt to Star Wars. She's here this evening with her 7th book, Free Women, Free Men, Sex, Gender, Feminism, a selection of her most notable articles and lectures on these subjects. Her 3rd general essay collection will be out a year from this fall from Pantheon, the publisher that's been publishing her work since Sexual Personae. Professor Paglia was co-founding contributor and columnist for Salon.com, beginning with his debut issue in 1995. She's written numerous articles on art, literature, popular culture, feminism, religion, education, and politics for publications around the world. It's a pleasure to thank you all for being here tonight, and now please join in welcoming back to Seattle, Camille Paglia.
Well, hello. I don't know which mic to use first here. What a pleasure to be back in this beautiful city. The first time I came for a book tour here, I think, was 1992, and it's just always a thrill to come back to Seattle. So this is my 7th book, and I had hoped it was going to be my 3rd essay collection, because it's been since 1994 since my 2nd one was published. I've written so many things all over the world. I think many important pieces on religion and history, culture, and so on. But my publisher felt that my pieces on sex, gender, and feminism have been so prophetic for the last 25 and 30 years that it was urgent to get them out now. So we went forward with this book, and it's absolutely amazing how almost like a tsunami, events in the culture swept forward, and things I wrote in my introduction to this book last summer, when I wrote the introduction, seem to speak directly to this moment. Now, my premier principles as a person and as a thinker are free thought and free speech. I am truly a child of the 1960s in that respect. And I am totally opposed to any kind of curtailment of either of those two things for whatever laudable social causes anyone may think that they have. My particular influences came from my experience in the mid-1960s in college. When I entered college in 1964, in that fall. That spring had happened, the free speech movement at Berkeley. Mario Savio is an enormous culture hero to me. In college, my influences were heavily the beat poets, who created the great scandal, City Lights Bookshop in 1957, the obscenity trial, the arrest of the manager of City Lights Bookstore for selling an obscene poem. Allen Ginsberg's Howl, Kaddish. These were huge influences on me in college. Same thing, Lenny Bruce. Okay, Lenny Bruce, who is the person who transformed the medium of comedy, stand-up comedy, from merely gags in the vaudeville style to a very satiric, acerbic, but meaningful style of analysis of social problems. Lenny Bruce is the one who made comedy politically and socially relevant. Lenny Bruce was an equal opportunity offender. He went against both liberal and conservative shibboleths. Right? And then the first thinker really who had an enormous impact on me in adolescence was Oscar Wilde. By chance, in a secondhand bookstore in Syracuse, upstate New York, I stumbled on a copy of a book it was a British book called The Epigrams of Oscar Wilde, and it actually is still available from the Dover editions. They thought, presumably, that no one in the U.S. would recognize the word epigram, so they call it now The Wit and Humor of Oscar Wilde. But it has all of his, many of his wonderful one-liners from his plays, from his writings, from his dinner table conversation in London, organized by topic, nature, men and women, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, this scathing, uncompromising quality of Oscar Wilde's thinking, huge impact on me. And then in college, this was before the Stonewall Rebellion, before the gay liberation movement. Gay men once were absolutely scathing, going against every possible social convention. They would say things that would make you wince, like about polio victims and so on, all right? Now, what happened to that, okay? After Stonewall, gay men have become increasingly either recreational, and hedonistic, or they have become very PC and politicized, all right? And so all of a sudden, they're part of the army for the control of speech, right? But I think underground gay men are still just as bitchy as ever, I'm happy to say. But and then in college and graduate school, I began to read also the influences on Oscar Wilde himself, which would be Baudelaire and Marquis de Sade, who was imprisoned for the way he defied convention, etc. It wasn't that long before I was in college that there was the great trial for obscenity in England about Lady Chatterley's lover. Penguin Books was brought up on charges of obscenity, and when Penguin Books triumphed, it was a great blow, against the forces of censorship. So that's what I have stood for, right? And my particular wing of feminism was suppressed for many years. My feminism predates second wave feminism, which was created by Betty Friedan with her co-founding of NOW in 1966. I was already a feminist because I was directly impacted by first wave feminism in the early 1960s. 1961, when I was 14 years old, I suddenly became obsessed with Amelia Earhart after an article about yet another clue was found, whatever it was, that was in the Syracuse Herald Journal. And I embarked on a 3-year research project in high school into Amelia Earhart. I went to all kinds of places. I ransacked the old newspapers in the bowels of the Syracuse Library and so on. And also, I was obsessed with Katharine Hepburn, whom I saw on late night TV. What I was getting from Katharine Hepburn, I did not realize for decades, was actually the real flame of first wave feminism, because her mother was the head of the Connecticut women's suffrage organization. Her aunt was also a campaigner for women's suffrage, and Hepburn herself campaigned as a small child with balloons and at protests, votes for women, etc. Right? So I was getting this first impact of 1920s, 1930s, after women had just won the right to vote in 1920. We wanted to reproduce in my new book the actual page from Newsweek magazine in 1963, the letters to the editor, where I was given the lead letter to the editor when the Soviets launched Valentina Tereshkova into space. She was the first woman to enter space at a time when women were banned from the American space program. And I wrote a protest letter. I was 16 years old. This is before NOW was ever founded. I said that this happened. She went into space on the very anniversary, 35th anniversary, whatever it was, of Amelia Earhart flying the Atlantic. All right? And I said it's obvious that Miss Earhart's quest for equal opportunity for American women still remains to be won. Okay. All right. So I was already a feminist, before all this happened in the late 1960s. Then I tried to join the women's movement. It did not succeed, because the women's movement, had all kinds of preconceptions about the suppression of speech, They were anti-rock and roll, anti-art, go down the line. I was one of the, what we later would call pro-sex feminists. Right? So in the 1970s, for example, I loved Charlie's Angels. Okay, I loved Cosmopolitan magazine. I loved Scavullo's covers. Meanwhile, the other feminists were like occupying Helen Gurley Brown's offices and like wanting the whole magazine to be shut down, etc. Right? I loved the Bond girls, James Bond girls. They're Ursula Andress coming out of the water with her white bikini. Okay, and like she's the conch, one with her knife, etc. So I love the Dallas cowboy cheerleaders. There's no way I could be taken into the women's movement. I was drummed right out of it, right from the start. Okay, so people who say, "Oh, she was made by feminine," I was not made, okay, by Betty Friedan. As I say in the book, Betty Friedan did not create Germaine Greer in Australia, and she did not create me in upstate New York. Okay, right? And it's about time people realize the transformations in women that happened very radically in the mid-20th century are not entirely due to the women's movement. I show in the introduction to this book, how many things preceded, okay, the creation of Now. Okay, I mean, Diana Rigg, okay, in the Avengers was in a black leather catsuit. Okay, before Now, okay, doing all that stuff. Okay, Betty Friedan didn't create her either. Okay, so anyway, okay, all right. I don't want to get sidetracked on that. Then the whole thing will turn into that. All right, now wait. Let me. I only have a certain amount of time here. All right, so let me. Let me see. All right. So what happened was Madonna. Okay, Madonna was so important. I mean, the way Madonna is behaving now, it's such an embarrassment. All right, because the current Madonna bears no resemblance to the pioneering Madonna of the 1980s and 90s. But she will live forever for what she did. Okay? The pro-sex feminist movement of the 1990s was made possible by Madonna's trifling with pornography and exposure of the body and so on, and her brilliant videos of the 80s and 90s. I believe they are truly works of art. Right? Her great period was 1983 to 1992. And I periodically do show some of those videos, like Vogue and Open Your Heart and so on. And these are truly works of art. Okay? So at any rate, it's all of a sudden this long silenced wing of feminism, the pro-sex wing, burst forth, okay, in the 1990s. There was Feminists for Free Expression, for example, that I was allied with. I appeared at an event in the early 1990s and so on. What we were fighting against was the horrible scourge of political correctness and suppression of free thought and free speech during the 1980s in the anti-porn movement led by Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin, okay, the fanatics. Okay? So I include in this book okay, what I think is my classic attack on them. Okay? I call them the rebirth of Carrie Nation. And those women, they wrote an ordinance, which was indeed adopted by Minneapolis and Indianapolis, to shut down even the sale of men's magazines in those towns, like known as Playboy and Penthouse and so on the grounds that supposedly pornography caused violence against women, caused rape, caused murder, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? These women were deranged, okay, truly deranged women, but they ruled the 1980s in feminism. So then, thanks to Madonna, my pro-sex wing of feminism rose up. Okay, and it also was helped along by the lipstick lesbians of San Francisco. There was like a cell of them. Okay, sort of black leather, lesbians and so on. Right? So then we went national, and I thought, oh, now we've won. Okay, there's no problem. Okay, so I kind of retired from the scene in 1994 after being like out there with fisticuffs for a number of years, and then I went back to what I do. I wrote books on the movies. Okay, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. I wrote a book on poetry, a book on the visual arts, and right now, for 9 years, I've been involved researching Native American culture of the Northeast. That's what I'm doing. But I have to go back on the road. Okay, 23 years later, I have to return. Okay, all of a sudden, we've gone full circle again. Okay, and this horrible scourge, of political correctness is back. Even worse. Okay, we have people rioting and smashing windows at Berkeley. Okay, the place, the capital, okay, of the free speech movement and so on. Okay, so here I am again. Okay. I'm not happy about it. Okay, I'd rather be doing my Native American research. Okay, all right. So now, a number of things. First of all, what I'm calling for, the title of my book, okay, which is Free Women, Free Men. I'm calling for an end to the sex war, okay, in feminism. Okay, women are well launched now. Okay, so this kind of this reflex, snide, put downs of men that are everywhere. This has got to stop. Right? Now, I notice, wherever I go in the world, actually, that upper middle class career women are very unhappy. They're very unhappy, okay, even though they've achieved a certain status. What I'm saying is that feminists have to stop blaming men for their own unhappiness. The unhappiness is due, I believe, to huge systemic changes that women, for thousands of years, women had their own world. There was the world of women, and there was the world of men. And the sexes didn't have that much to do with each other, okay? This is a brand new experiment to have this new system where now women can be economically independent now. They're no longer dependent on a father or husband or brother, okay, for their sustenance, right? And they're working side by side with men in the workplace, right? This is an experiment. It's never happened before, right? And what I was saying in the book, that we may have to accept a certain amount of tension between the sexes in the workplace. Right? That if the feminist idea that if we can just suppress men enough, women will be happy. I say no, okay? I say, okay, it's on the basis of my own experience as a child in Italian-American immigrant community, okay, is that what women have lost is the old solidarity that they once had when they totally ruled the private sphere. The women's life all day long was with other women once, multi-generational, older women, okay, as well as the children, right? It was a huge tribal experience. And now what women are feeling is a sense of isolation and loneliness, disconnection, okay, from their old function. I'm not saying to go back. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying stop blaming men, all right? Like, for example, these marches that just happened, okay? The women were exhilarated. They were almost hysterical, okay? I don't think it had anything to do with feminism or anti-Trump or anything like that. I thought it was that women suddenly felt that surge of happiness again for being with other women, all right? You can actually see it in the Odyssey when Odysseus is washed up naked and alone. He's lost his ship, on the shores of Phaeacia, and he wakes to the sound of women's voices, laughing and singing and so on. It's the Princess Nausicaa going down to do the laundry on the shore. Okay? And actually, that is exactly what was going on up until fairly recently, where women were all together. They did all their chores together. They did the laundry. They did the cooking. I can remember this from my childhood in Endicott, New York, upstate New York, among the immigrant Italian women. All four of my grandparents, plus my mother, were born in Italy. Right? So I actually had that experience, the experience that went on for thousands of years in the agrarian era. Well, women all together. In fact, my mother described as a small child in Italy how all the women would get together to do the laundry and go up the hill to Il Sorgo, which was a fountain cut out of the side of the mountain. Probably went back thousands of years to the Roman period and so on. She remembered the singing, the picnicking, et cetera, okay? So even though people were laboring physically in the agrarian era, there was a happiness, okay, a sense of identity. There was no quest for identity. Now, it's no place for an independent thinker, okay? If you were an independent thinker, you had no options as a woman except to become a nun. Okay, so I know I would have been a nun, okay, 100 years ago. All right, I know it, okay. And obviously, communities are intellectually repressive in their own way. Nevertheless, we're in a period now of quest for identity, tremendous pressures on young people to form their own identity separate from those old automatic tribal and community affiliations. So I think there's a tremendous, as a classroom teacher, of now, more than 40 years, I can see this, and it's really, there's a tremendous sense of psychological dislocation among young people, and they find many ways to try to achieve some sorts of identity. And part of it right now, of course, is social media, which is causing the total, entropy in terms of ability to reason, to read, to write, the old things. And so on. All right. Now, I'm also calling for an end to this insanity of excluding biology, okay, from gender studies. Now, how in the world did this happen? All right? How did women's studies and gender studies end up teaching about gender without any reference whatever to biology or to hormones? All right? And right now, post-structuralism dominates gender studies everywhere. Now, I spent 6 months writing my dissection of Foucault, okay, what was that, 27 years ago. Now, assignment, hello, anyone who thinks that Foucault is somehow, the master of the universe has clearly not read my exposure of him in Junk Bonds and Corporate Raiders, all right? I mean, the man was a fraud. I'm sorry, okay? Compared to Freud, okay? I mean, Freud is out and Foucault is in. The post-structuralists, pose as leftists, okay? But what were they doing in the past few decades with this crazy parasitic growth of this administrator master class, okay, that has taken over the universities, right? At a period of obscene, okay, rise in tuition costs, student debt that's crippling families and so on. Where were these leftists, the great leftists, okay, on our college campuses, okay? Were they resisting the administrators, okay? Were they denouncing student debts, okay? Were they lamenting, the plight of adjunct teachers and so on? No. They were all running to conferences, talking about Foucault with their stupid elitist jargon. Okay, you think they thought that's leftism? Okay, these post-structuralists are the worst mercenary careerists. Okay, in this country, right? The leading post-structuralists, okay, and new historicists are retiring as multimillionaires. And they pose as leftists. Okay, it is a scandal. Forget Foucault, for heaven's sakes. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. Okay, so we have to bring biology and authentic study of medicine, of anthropology, of history, back into gender studies. That's one thing I'm definitely calling for. Now, aside from these things, okay, there are a number. I'm on the warpath against, okay, the bureaucracy of the campuses. Okay, at Bennington College, my first job in the 1970s, in 1976, we had an uprising, okay, as faculty against the trustees and the administrators, the president of that college, and it was like huge, publicized. Nora Ephron went up there and wrote it up for Esquire magazine and so on. And the faculties are totally castrated. What are they doing? The faculties have absolutely been marginalized in this country. And they didn't utter a peep as this administrative masterclass took over. The administrators who are in league with federal mandates or federal authorities in Washington. I mean, we're living in an age of Stalinism right now. Okay, and again, the leftists have they talk a big talk. Okay, but they do nothing where it really matters. Okay, which is demand 50% reduction in the number of administrators. Okay, and also 75% reduction in their salaries. Okay, which often exceeds that of the faculty members. People should realize how many of the ills that I'm decrying about the suppression of speech and free thought on campus are coming from the administrators. Okay, who are these social welfare do-gooders. Oscar Wilde, okay, was absolutely scathing about these humanitarians, these aggressive philanthropists who dominated the Victorian period. Oh, okay. I had the feeling you were looming there. Okay. All right. At any rate, in terms of other things in the book, there's a reprint of what I consider an important piece of mine in Time magazine, where I called for the end of this outrageous age 21 law in the United States, where young people cannot buy a beer. Okay, this is do you know nowhere in the world except in very repressive regimes, right? Like the United Arab Emirates and so on. Is there anything like that? Okay. What exactly? What mothers against drunk driving? Okay, they wandered into an area here that has been extremely destructive. When that rule was passed in 1984, okay, what did young people do? Unable now to drink, okay, they began taking the club drugs, of course, okay, ecstasy and ketamine and all this crap that they take into their bodies, right? And what's happened to the ability, of young people to go to a bar, learn how to drink in a sensible way in an adult context, be able able to sit with the opposite sex, learn how to talk, how to flirt, discuss ideas, okay? It has absolutely a cruel law. No one has raised, I mean, you can buy marijuana in Colorado, right? And young people can't get a glass of beer, okay, when they arrive in college. Do you realize how outrageous that is? Now, why aren't you more outraged, okay? That has to end. All right. Now, what else here? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I've hit quite a few things. This is really good. Let's. Oh yes. So just to return to what I was saying about the the solidarity of women in the agrarian period. I think that probably part of my ability to analyze things comes from my exposure to almost a kind of a capsule, condensed version of human history. I experienced the agrarian era through my contact with those powerful country women who had immigrated. And there's a whole piece in my book about Southern women, okay, about the power of the rural paradigm and the strength of Southern women and so on. But we were, a whole town of us, really, from Italy, concentrated in this area of the Triple Cities in upstate New York because of the shoe factories, the Endicott Johnson shoe factories. So I then had a direct experience of the industrial era, which followed the agrarian era. My grandfather, everyone in the town went to the factories, which dominated Endicott with the smokestacks in that period before environmental laws. The soot would be heavy, on windowsills. You could smell the tanning pools and so on. So I had experienced the industrial era, and then my father, fresh out of the paratroopers in World War II, was able to go to college on the GI Bill. I was born while he was in college. My parents married at 20 and had me at 21. So he was like mopping the cafeteria floor, the only member of his large family to go to college. Then he became a high school teacher and then a professor at Lemoyne College in Syracuse. So we moved into the surface sector, economy. Right? So in my own life, I've experienced all these transitions in human history. So I think it's given me a kind of insight into change. Now, what I'm saying in the book is that those women, the country women, okay, were more powerful, okay, than any feminist. Okay, they were physically powerful, literally, in that period before automatic washers and dryers. Everyone did laundry by hand. I can remember my grandmother washing on the back porch with a washboard. Okay, they were powerful like this. All right, and these women had big voices, okay, and big attitudes. All right? So, in fact, once when my father was teaching high school in the small farming town of Oxford, New York, we lived for a year in the upper floor of a farmhouse, and there was like a hilarious moment. My father was out with his brother. They were standing outside smoking a cigarette, and suddenly the farm woman yelled at them. Okay, a calf had escaped from the barn, and she said, "Stop her!" Okay, to my father and my uncle, and the calf thundered by. My father and my uncle just stepped backwards as it went by, and the farm woman chased the calf and came back carrying the calf. Right? And as she's passed them, she said, "Men." Okay, those were the women. For thousands of years, country women had physical power and mental power, and they were the equals of men. In fact, it's no coincidence that the first states and territories to give women the right to vote were in the West. Okay, that it was the pioneer areas. Okay, where it was obvious that women were the equals of men. Whereas right to the very end, the educated states, the states where the great universities were, like Pennsylvania, New York State, Massachusetts, and so on, refused to grant women the right to vote. Not until the constitutional amendment was passed in 1920. It's because the differential between the upper middle class man and upper middle class woman, okay, in the late 19th century and early 20th century was very profound. Okay, a lady seemed to be a different entity, seemed to be far more emotional, tended to faint, tended to be rather delicate, etc. All right, so the idea of granting such women, however admirable, the right to vote, was not as easy as it was for the territories. You want me to? Okay, maybe. Okay, why don't we just move to the question period then? Because I love the question period, and I'm sure you would too.